I didn't grow up with the religious practice that our families try to implement today. The development, I would say, into more of religiosity and religious awareness came here.
Becoming religious here is kind of easier than becoming religious in Lebanon.
One of my visits, I was in law school at that time. They're all shaking hands, and I placed my hand on my chest to the females. She said that American people are more religious, more committed to the faith than we are.
You're not taking anything with you, so why are you working this hard? I got the feeling that maybe religion doesn't want us to be this active.
A believer is one who contributes. He's not just like waiting for life to hand him the opportunity. He creates the opportunity. These are hard conversations to have. Things are being set up as Islam versus the West. The religion was never meant to be isolated to a certain ethnic community. Look around the world. I mean, you can't say, oh, I'm not American, and you're holding an American passport. You can't say, I'm not Lebanese, and literally you've never seen any other country other than Lebanon.
Okay, maybe for me, for you, you're able to do that. Now your kids.
Yeah.
How do you make sure they hold on to that as well?
My daughter, I'll tell you, and I'll share something very personal, right?
Before we start today's episode, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your day and giving this podcast to listen. And I also wanted to remind you that the only way this podcast will ever grow is with your support and with your help. So subscribe to the podcast, like this video, and now let's get the show started. Welcome aboard Middle East Airlines.
والمتوجهة إلى
طيران الشرق الأوسط يرحب
مدينة القدس العربية.
Ask me questions, I'll try to answer.
Hey Jalal, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Thank you for coming.
Jafar, it's my pleasure.
Let's start off with you introducing yourself. But the way I want you to introduce yourself is, who is Jalal when he looks in the mirror? Who is Jalal to Jalal?
Jafar, I didn't even start yet. You're already getting philosophical.
That's how it is.
That's tough. That's a tough one. The topic of identity has always been really near and dear to my heart. And I think a lot of people may not realize this. It's just really coming from a yearning for me to better understand myself. So in a lot of my writings and my lectures, even my legal work and my practice, the concept of identity always comes up, right? Now, definitely identity nowadays is very politicized, but even before some of these more politically relevant, discussions on identity, just this idea of knowing who you are. And it stems from the hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, from the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, man arafa nafsa arafa rabbah.
Yeah.
Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. So when I look in the mirror, I don't see the typical things that I think people would assume, like the attorney, the entrepreneur, the speaker, the writer, the author, the influencer, all that stuff, which, yes, I may be playing some of those roles. And those are in one category. And then, like, even fundamentally, foundationally for me, which I don't put them in the same category, is my role as a husband, as a father, as a son, as a brother. Those, I don't mix the two, right? Those are a lot more essential than some of these day-to-day roles that you may play in society, right? When I look in the mirror, I'm looking at, hopefully, a servant of God, someone who's trying to fulfill a purpose and an opportunity. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I'm trying to do my best. That's when I'm looking in the mirror and I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I'm staring that guy down. No passes. It's like, what are you doing today? And it's a challenge. Every single day, it's a challenge, it's a struggle, but it's a beautiful one, right? I know my ups, I know my lows. I know my ups, I know my downs, I know my highs, I know my lows. And I don't expect or push people in areas that I'm not doing for myself. Uh, and that's why even when it comes to my work and all of its facets, it's always connecting back to the identity. And there's a lot of empathy, because when I'm talking to people, I'm like literally seeing myself, that reflection in the mirror that you were just asking about. I'm seeing myself in that person. So even when I'm sitting down with Ja'far, I'm literally seeing a part of Jalal. So for me, empathy ends up playing a really big role in the way I interact with people, because my identity and myself is being then shared and reflected with the people that I'm interacting with.
Right. But essentially it starts as a servant of God. That's how you see it.
And that's the challenge, is
Living up to that in a way.
you are nothing more and nothing less than that. Meaning you are fulfilled, you are complete in that identity. You don't need anything more, right? But at the same time, it's like, are you actually fulfilling it? Because the idea of even being a servant of God and worshiping God, human beings innately worship. But it's then up to us to, what do we worship? It's the way we are wired. We end up worshiping something. But then what do you end up worshiping? Are you worshiping Allah, God, the one who is of no need, the one who is the cause of all causes and everything comes from him? Or, which we end up finding ourselves practically, we're worshiping our whims,
Our desires.
We're worshiping material things. We're worshiping concepts, ideas, ideals even, right? Expectations. There's a lot of things that we may find ourselves end up worshiping and replacing it, with, replacing God with those things, instead of that real true service and worship of God.
And my second question is, how did you end up here? So the podcast is called Not From Here, because we're not from here. And I would like to know the story of how Jalal ended up in America, or your family ended up in America.
That's a good one. That's an excellent one. So I think my story, my background is unique to some and then common to many others. I think I share an experience that many in our community, not just in Dearborn, in Michigan, but many, I think, across the United States and even Canada may experience. You could also say probably, some of the European countries as well. I rarely like to just generally refer to the West, because I think it's often a loaded statement, and we'll get to that.
Probably.
Right? We'll probably get to that. My grandparents on both sides, on both my father's side and my mother's side, came to the United States in the late 70s, escaping the civil war in Lebanon. I'll tell you that each of their experiences, and when I say each, I mean like both of my grandmothers, both of my grandfathers, they had a very, like, I would say, movie-like experience. One experience I'll tell you was my grandfather on my mother's side. He left before my grandmother and my mom and my aunts and my uncle. And my aunts and my mom and my uncle were left with my grandmother. She followed them. My grandmother literally was dodging bullets in Beirut during the Civil War with her kids under her arms to get them to the embassy, to leave the country, to go through that whole process.
Wow.
So like when we hear the story, and my grandmother doesn't share it much because she just has so much humility. And I think like a lot of us, if we have any virtues, they are inherited. A lot of our virtues are inherited and then reinforced through the way we're raised. So long story short, my family came to the States in the late 70s. My mom was 9 years old. My father was 18. They came with like nothing, So that immigrant story of coming to this country, trying to make a better life for themselves, for their families, was very real. My dad came as a young man. My mom came as a young lady. and they essentially took on their lives here. All of my siblings and my parents got married in the early 80s. All my siblings and I were born and raised here for the most part. The unique thing, but again, some families did this as well, was we moved back to Lebanon. So we were all born here, but we moved back to Lebanon when I was 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So my elementary years were in Lebanon. So I developed the Arabic language, and
6 is very young. Formative years.
yeah.
Yeah.
My elementary years. So السنين الابتدائية كانت
Yeah.
بلبنان.
Yeah.
You know, I was there in Lebanon. Definitely my experience was a little bit different than my brothers and my sisters, because they were a little bit older. But you know, I'm so thankful to my parents for giving us that experience. They wanted us to be immersed into the culture and be able to live a part of our lives there. And my connection to our homeland of Lebanon, I think it's deeply affected by the experience that from 6 to 10, 11 years old.
That's you came back here at 11?
Yeah, 10.
Okay.
10. I was like 10 and a half. So I came back. I had skipped the 5th grade, finished 4th in Lebanon, skipped the 5th grade, went into 6th grade here at Woodworth Middle School in Dearborn. And that's when we came back. My brother Ali had started at Fortson. I was starting at middle school. Both of my sisters were in college at that time. But yeah, I had that foundation, right?
How do you feel that changed you? How do you feel that impacted you rather, growing up?
I think it definitely had an impact. There's positives and negatives. There's pros and cons to that.
I don't know how much you would remember from being 10 or 11 when you came back, but coming back from basically you start realizing what's happening around you and you're in Lebanon, and then at 10, 11, you're back in America. How does that kind of work when you make that switch?
So I'll tell you, there's a lot of things to unpack there. Both from a cultural standpoint, a religious standpoint. Mind you, a lot of people assume that my family's religious foundation came from us going to Lebanon. At that time, I didn't grow up with the religious practice that our families try to implement today. I mean, we're very, very far from perfect, and we look to many others for guidance. And but our family background was definitely more cultural. My grandfather, Allah yarhamu, my maternal grandfather, he definitely raised us with a high sense of like what's aib, you know, like this is appropriate, this is inappropriate. But not necessarily from a religious backdrop, though he was definitely a man of faith in the sense that he admired the religion. He made sure that before he passed away, he did complete his Hajj pilgrimage. He went for ziyarah. I vividly remember sitting down with him and reciting Quran, and that he would bring us, you know, with him and sit next to him, and he'd recite Quran with us. But a lot of what we had growing up was more so cultural rather than it being from a, hey, this is what is haram and halal.
Yeah.
This is what's expected from the religious lens. The development, I would say, into more of religiosity and religious awareness came here in Dearborn when we came back.
A lot of people wouldn't think that. They would think that religious background comes from Lebanon.
No, not at all.
And you think, I think I've come across people that think that too. And for some reason, for people that lived enough in Lebanon and came here, you would be surprised that becoming religious here is kind of easier than becoming religious in Lebanon.
So I think there's a huge opportunity for practicing Muslims in the United States, in Canada, and generally in the West, right? There's a huge opportunity. Why? Because there's there's more of like a concerted effort on the family, its schedule, and its lifestyle, because and I'm facing it right now with my kids, right? When they're going to school. So with a lot of the challenges that we're facing in society today, there's definitely more of like a focus, like, listen, they have to be in Islamic school. It's almost like
a necessity right now, especially.
Yes, right? And that's something that I always had in the back of my mind, before my kids were even born. But there's a lot of different considerations, right? A lot of families can't afford private school education.
Of course.
And that's a very practical consideration. But when you're looking at it from the general opportunity sense, seeing what the challenges that we face in being in a, let's say, non-Muslim society versus what is generally seen as a Muslim society. Even in Lebanon, there's a significant Muslim population, but Lebanon is also very diverse.
Very.
Right? And this is something, by the way, that we experienced living in Lebanon. We lived in Sur, in the Junub, in the south. Even Sur is very diverse, not just from the schools of thought, having Sunnis and Shia amongst the Muslims, but also, there's a significant Christian population, right?
It's a tourist attraction as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in Lebanon as a country, it's such a beautiful country, such a beautiful people. But again, diversity at the highest level, diversity even in lifestyles, right?
Yeah.
So even for people that are of a certain confession in their faith, there's also a lot of different ideological influences, right? There's different, philosophies, different ideologies. And though coming from that background allows a person in the non-Muslim society, and let's say generally the West, to be able to navigate those challenges even more, because there's less of a shock.
Yeah.
So when I'm speaking to like a lot of my friends who may be coming from different countries, there's more of a shock when they're coming into these non-Muslim societies if they had that background of growing up in some other Middle Eastern countries or some other countries that are predominantly Muslim and have like very much a Muslim culture.
Okay.
Right. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When we used to travel, so after moving back, we used to travel back and forth to Lebanon, as kids growing up.
Right.
My family used to go and visit. My sister ended up getting married in Lebanon, lived there. But we used to go back and forth a lot. And then even into adulthood, I would go back and forth, especially when I would go on ziyarah. I'd usually stop for like a night or two in Lebanon and typically go down to Sur, visit my sister, and then be on my way, right? One of my visits, I was in law school at that time, and I remember engaging with some attorneys. We were having a family gathering, and then there were some attorneys that were present. And then I think I was introduced by my brother-in-law that, hey, this is Jalal. He's a law student in America. And there was, I believe, 2 males, 2 females. And they're all shaking hands. And I placed my hand on my chest to the females, respecting. And I said, marhaba, kifik, how are you? I didn't say salamu alaikum because I wasn't sure if they were Muslim or not. And then also sometimes for some different reasons, even Muslims may get turned off by the greeting of salamu alaikum, which is interesting because salamu alaikum is the greeting of heaven, as we're taught by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One day he was visited by someone in the early days of Islam, and the person came with a typical greeting, and the Prophet said, would you like for me to give you the greeting of the people of heaven? He's like, what is that? He said, assalamu alaikum. He's like, I've never heard anything like that before. You're literally sending someone peace, right? So at that time, I placed my hand on my chest, and I acknowledged the person. I'm very much adamant about acknowledging the other person. And she smiled and she said, بتعرف أهل أمريكا ملتزمين أكتر مننا. That the American people, right, and referring to like our American people, are more religious, more committed to the faith than we are. at that time, I think I was like 20 years old. And it really made me think, I'm like, man, what a blessing. What a blessing that I'm back home in Lebanon. Mind you, the United States to me is home.
Yeah.
Lebanon is home. I have two homes, two that I hold dear to my heart. But I'm back home, right? And there's this nod from people that, man, you're out there and you're more committed. See, that something that a lot of people don't realize is this idea of being committed. Regardless if you belong to this faith or not, you're committed to it. And then it dictates a certain lifestyle. It brings, there's certain discipline. There's a willpower. There's like, I'm doing things that other people aren't doing.
Yeah.
And I'm refraining from things that other people aren't refraining from. That's something that even for people that are not practicing, and I try to share this with, young professionals, young Muslims, men and women alike in our community, like, listen, be proud. Be proud that you're committing yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. And you're going to fall. You're going to make mistakes.
You're not expected to be perfect.
Far from it.
Yeah.
Far from it.
But to that point of her saying that we're more religious here, the way I think about this when I think about it is, when I used to live there, the mindset was religion is abundant. Everyone's living that lifestyle, especially if in your close community, like everyone is living it. But when I moved here, there's kind of this desperation of, okay, you moved here, you're maybe, especially moving here, you're thinking about your faith and how you're going to integrate your faith in your day-to-day life. And you don't think of America as a place where religion, your practice is that abundant as it was back home. So you have to take care of it more, because maybe there's not much of it. It's under, what's the word? It's just not, you don't see it as frequent. Like, that's how I used to think about it when I coming here, because my parents were scared. They were like, حتروح تنتزع بأمريكا. And in my head, that was never going to happen. And I came here conscious of that.
Yeah.
So it kind of made me hold on to that a little bit more. So maybe that plays a role in it too.
Absolutely. And I think, so even in Dearborn, right? A lot of people across the country in the United States, and I think people in Dearborn don't realize, our community here in Dearborn don't realize, a lot of communities across the country look to us. And I'll tell you, which was a huge blessing for us to be a part of this and organize this. This year, Mainstay's Muharram program was called Experience Muharram. And we had a targeted effort as a pilot of this, convention style program to, reach out and let people know outside of Dearborn that, hey, if you want to fly in, you want to drive in, come experience it with us.
Yeah.
So, we our team kind of on the logistics side got different, here, you can fly in from this place and fly in here, or you can book this hotel, and we got rates for hotels. We got over a dozen restaurants to give discounts to anybody that mentions Muharram. Like, we facilitated something so that it would make it easier for people to come and be like, oh, you know what? There's something for me to come to. And there were so many people that I was shocked. How many people? I think over like 17 cities were represented in our program.
Wow.
From all over the country, not like 17 cities in Michigan, 17 cities from all over the country, from East Coast to West Coast. And I was just floored by how many people were just like, we feel like we are, in Najaf or Karbala. Like, we feel like the atmosphere. Now, for me, I'm like, I think that's a little too much, being in Najaf or Karbala. But the sense of what I think they're talking about is that sense of community at a large scale, right? The energy, the vibe, right?
Yeah.
When you have in one hall, and alhamdulillah, in Dearborn, and I talk about this even in my lectures, I say, listen, people may criticize in the community itself that why do we have so many centers and why do we have so many organizations? Why do we have, and I say all the time, this is something to be celebrated. And we need more, by the way, because look at all of the centers during Muharram, which is the peak in the year, right? They're all full. And guess what? Many in the community are still not there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it from like a negative sense. I'm saying it from an opportunity standpoint that there's so many other people that could participate, but all of the places are full. And it's okay to have different flavors and different styles. The diversity is a good thing. It needs to be celebrated. That kind of diversity is something that we should be proud of.
I don't think you see that anywhere else but here, like especially here in Dearborn,
Compared to where?
other places across the country.
So
On this scale,
I would say you do have some communities that definitely have, a lot of people and from different backgrounds. For example, on the East Coast, the New York, New Jersey community, a lot of different centers, a lot of different backgrounds. And when I'm saying backgrounds, I'm typically like referring to like ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
And then even when I'm saying ethnic backgrounds, it also includes, which are often not talked to, and they are a smaller part of the community. Most of the Shia Muslim community, I would say, is, when you're looking at who's participating, but just generally who's participating, who's not participating, mostly are from immigrant backgrounds, but you definitely have a sizable African-American community, a sizable, Caucasian white community. You have even some from the Latino community, the community of, I would say, converts or reverts, individuals that were not born into the faith, are a community that I'm always humbled by. And whenever I get a chance to meet anyone from those communities, I'm like, man, you're my people.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, we belong to a spiritual heritage
Right.
together. Doesn't matter the color of ours. What we're taught from Ahlul Bayt, we're taught by our faith, is that it doesn't matter what color your skin is. Doesn't matter if you're, Lebanese, Iraqi, Iranian, Arab, non-Arab, American, Canadian. It doesn't matter. For us, it matters your character, your competence, your willingness to grow, your empathy, how you are with other people. Do you want community, right? If you see something wrong, are you gonna make it right?
yeah,
Are you gonna like make a positive change, or are you gonna be one who just continues to complain and criticize and add negativity? For me, like any space that I'm in, energy is so important.
top priority.
100%. Maybe not top priority, but it's definitely up there, because I don't know how much time I have. Like, I know I'm gonna make mistakes, so I'm making calculations all the time.
Yeah.
Like even in coming here, I'm like, okay, Jafar is a priority for me right now. I want to have this conversation with him, and I'm constantly thinking, when I'm doing something, it's at the cost of something else. There's always an opportunity cost, right? So if I'm doing this, that means I'm not doing something else. What's the thing that I'm not doing, right? And not to make it transactional, bil'akis, it's actually, when you're investing in people and relationships and conversations, the effect, the positive effect that can come from that is beyond measure.
Yeah.
So for me, like, and kind of trying to bring this full circle into the experience, the opportunity, like looking at our background, when you're investing in your relationships and your people, that's probably like the best thing that you can do.
Right. That's why I appreciate you being here
I
more.
appreciate you doing this.
So that's how you got to America, living in Lebanon, all that. When you go back there, how is that like from a perspective of you dealing with the people there? What kind of differences do you see between you, Jalal, that lives in America, most of your time in America, with the typical Lebanese person? Family, friends that you might have? Because there's a change there. It's different. You talking to people here is different than you talking to people there. I always talk about being torn between being here and being there. And when you're here, you're thinking about your life there, and that's where I'm from. And then when you go there, you realize, like, this is where I'm from, but you're kind of not fulfilled on the inside because your actual life, most of your life is here.
Mm.
So how do you kind of go through that when you go back to visit?
So I'm of a little bit of a different perspective.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think what your show Jafar is gonna do is it's going to bring out a lot more of this diversity of experience, right? And for me, even this conversation, similar to the conversations that I have when I'm visiting Lebanon, whether it's for work or for family or a combination of the two, right? The last time I was in Lebanon was a couple months ago, and I was in Beirut for work for I think it was 2-3 days, and then I was in Sur for 1 day to see my sister, right? It was like I was only in Lebanon for 4 days.
Yeah.
And I tacked on 24 hours, literally like I think 23 hours to go to Iraq. I flew into Baghdad. I went in Ziyara. I went to Maqam Imam al-Kadhim, Imam al-Jawad alayhim as-salam. I went to Karbala, Imam al-Hussein, Abu Fadl Abbas. I went to Najaf, Imam Ali alayhi salam. I slept the night in Najaf. And I drove back to Baghdad in the morning. And I flew back to Beirut.
So basically, you don't have time to process your emotions.
No, I definitely. So for me, some people, when I say that, like I went for a ziyara, full ziyara, with the exception of Samarra and visiting the shrine of Imam al-Askari, Imam al-Hadi.
Yeah.
But I did a full ziyara, and actually it was in 8 hours. All right.
Yeah.
And people are like, that's crazy. For me, that traveling, that ability to go and come, I get energized from it. So then when I am experiencing people in my journeys, for whatever reason it may be, right? What's my purpose there? I always have an underlying objective, which is to learn. Because the more I learn about other people, the more I learn about myself.
Of course.
Right? So when I am going to and from, I'm not gonna tell you I feel like a global citizen. I know some people have that perspective. I'm a citizen of the world. No, I don't feel like I'm a citizen of the world. I feel like I'm a lifelong student, in the sense of like I'm looking and observing and interacting with people very proactively because I want to learn and I want to become better. Right? What I do find is there's so much more in similarities and commonalities, even though there are definitely huge distinctions between an experience of somebody who is living their whole life here and just like seeing what's going on here, and then somebody who is, whether it be in Lebanon, Iraq, or any other part of the Middle East, or even generally like, that side of the side of the world, the Eastern Hemisphere. And I don't mean to overgeneralize in that sense, because that's like a huge part of the world, right? The majority of the world's there. But like, I'll tell you, even beyond that, like where I've traveled in Europe, mainly in like the United Kingdom, and then even in Iraq. So in Dearborn, you have this experience between Lebanese and Iraqis for the longest time. Man, I've loved my experience with the Iraqi community. Some of my best friends are from the Iraqi community. I've tried as much as I can to immerse myself in that culture. My friends and I joke about me having an Iraqi passport. I get it all the time. Some people think I'm Iraqi, which I'm honored by. But it just goes to show you. So if it's like that in Iraq for me, in Lebanon, I feel home. Are there challenges? Sure. I think some of the challenges that may come out of it are people's preconceived notions, right? That if you're coming from the United States or from this side of the world, that you're just, rolling with cash. You got it made, right?
Yeah.
And some may not realize that as much as people may be suffering in different parts of the world, I'm not saying I'm suffering, alhamdulillah. Definitely so blessed. But I work like nonstop. And when I say and the people that I surround myself around, we're very ambitious. Like a lot of times people will ask me like, how do you do what you do? People are confused,
Yeah.
right? Because they see all these different things that are coming from me, from my teams. And I say, first and foremost, anything that you see that's good, it's just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessing. He's just putting a nice bow on it.
Absolutely.
Packaging it beautifully, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does with his servants. People that deserve and people that don't deserve. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses.
Yeah.
Whoever he pleases, whoever he wishes to bless. But I will say, I put in a lot of effort. Like nonstop. And I surround myself with people that have that same mindset, that are not just like chill.
Yeah.
Like some people say, oh, you're no chill. I'm like, yeah, in some respects, yeah. And wanting more, wanting better, wanting quality, wanting to grow, wanting to develop, absolutely. Not in the sense of not being content with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, but in the sense of, I look at it, Allah has given me an opportunity, how can I not take it?
Yeah.
And then take it to the next level and the next level and the next level. Because, and I keep on saying it, I don't know how much time I have left.
Yeah.
So whatever I'm doing here is what I'm going to take with me.
Right.
So whatever I put effort in, even if I don't see it here, I'm going to see it there.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this before, but I always like talking about this. It's people have this, I don't know where this comes from, but they see Jalal as someone that has a big religious position, or like you're from your talks, from your lectures, there is a big part of you that deals with the religious side. And for some reason, when it comes to religion, not necessarily the religion itself, but it's like you're not taking anything with you. So why are you working this hard? Or you're not supposed to be working all the time, because I don't know, I got the feeling that maybe religion doesn't want us to be this active and striving this much. But going back to what's written on your shirt, lions of the day, monks of the night. So maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. You hit a part that's definitely very like, it's at my core. Not that I manifest it and I do it all the time, but I'm trying, right? So yeah, there are preconceived notions about people that are quote unquote religious or faithful, that they just they're timid, they're to themselves, they're maybe even isolated from their community, from their society, spending time on the prayer mat, spending time at the mosque. Spending time on the prayer mat, spending time in the mosque are definitely virtues that need to be adopted. But I'll give you a story, and then I'll talk about this quote. The Holy Prophet ﷺ, it's narrated that he walked into the mosque and he saw a man praying. The Prophet prayed and he left. That man was still praying. He goes, he comes back, sees that same man praying, same spot, goes, comes back repeatedly, and the same guy is just praying non-stop. The Prophet waits for him in between his prayers, and when he sees him, he greets him, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam ya Rasulullah. He asks the man, he's like, I see you here all the time. I'm paraphrasing here. He's like, I see you here all the time. He's like, yeah, I've dedicated myself to a life of worship. Okay, do you have a family? He said, yes. He's like, who takes care of your family? It's like, I've entrusted my brother to take care of my wife and my children, as I've dedicated myself to a life of worship. The Prophet told him, get up, go to your family, take care of them. That is your worship. This quote. So if that doesn't like drive it home for people, as in what is the paradigm of a believer, of someone who's faithful, someone who's religious, then I don't know what will. If the Prophet literally is telling a man, go and work, go and take care of your family, go and provide. This quote, lions of the day, monks of the night, comes from a narration from Imam al-Baqir, the fifth Imam, where he was having a conversation with one of his companions, and he told him, would you like to know what it means to be a Shi'i? A Shi'i is simple. A Shi'i is a follower of Ahlul Bayt. Ahlul Bayt meaning the family of the Prophet. There's no family of the Prophet without the Prophet. A lot of times people misunderstand this loyalty or kind of emphasis on Ahlul Bayt being something that is independent from the Prophet and independent from God.
Yeah.
When in reality, all it is emphasizing
What the Prophet already said.
exactly, right? So Imam al-Baqir, alayhi salam, he tells his companion, he's like, would you like to know what it means to be a Shi'i? His companion says, may my life be sacrificed for you, because he's basically going to give him like a secret of what it means to be truly a follower. He gives him a long description. And one part that really stood out to me was he said, the Shia are rahbanan fil layl usudan fil nahar, right? They are like monks in the night, lions in the day. And our scholars, and I was reading the commentary on it, one of our scholars talks about it in the sense of this whole idea of being a monk in the night is your worship, your spiritual acts are to be done in the like seclusion, the privacy of the night. I mean, no one's gonna see you. So what you show the world is not those acts of worship. Now, congregational prayers, congregational, they're great.
Of course.
But am I gonna lay out my prayer mat in the middle of my law firm and have everybody like watch me pray? No. During the day, working hours, you have to be a lion. That's where lions of the day, where whatever your space is, you're in the marketplace, you're in sales, you're in investing, and of course, there's parameters within our faith of what's permissible, what's not permissible. Whatever you're doing, you're in the food and beverage space, you own a restaurant, you're in marketing, in media, you're filming. Be a lion. Meaning what? Hey, I got 10 shoots today. Yeah, let me make him 20. Why? Because this emphasis on a believer is one who contributes, one who serves, one who gives, one who does, one who acts. He's not just like waiting for life to hand him the opportunity. He creates the opportunity. He seizes the opportunity. He builds off of the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
That is like for us, when you're looking at it, the equation, the key to our success. Right? When Imam Ali alayhi salam tells us, do for this life as if you'll live forever, and do for the next life as if you'll die tomorrow. It's like, man, what a true balance. Meaning what? Time for prayer comes, I stop and I pray. Right. Now it's a challenge. Now it's not always something I'm implementing, but I know it, right? And I try.
And it's in the back of your head.
100%. Time for prayer, stop everything and pray. My schedule, I try to schedule everything around that so I'm not having something that's taking away from that time. And then when I have that set and it's time to work for this life in the sense of like something like I'm going all in. But there's always that sense of connecting it back to your underlying purpose, which is what we started off with, serving God.
Right.
Because if that's there, then you're going to be observing, even beyond those, let's say, specific acts of worship, you are going to be observing like, okay, but this is what it means to be someone who is serving God, right? Because I'm keeping that in mind, even when I'm servicing a client, even when I'm working on a contract, even when I'm starting up this new business, there's always that underlying foundation of, hey,
it's God first.
I'm God-centric. I have to be. My mindset is God-centric, faith-based, and purpose-driven.
Now, saying that, how do you balance culture and religion? Because culture is a big part of our life, It's what we brought back from back home. That's what we got with us. And religion is basically, it kind of dictates how we move about our day, Like you said, being God-centric. But they're not the same. And I think we mix them up a lot. And True. That happens because they do meet in some places. Mm-hmm. So how can we basically separate culture from religion?
So there's a conceptual separation and then there's a practical separation.
Yes.
conceptually, I think it's important for us to educate ourselves on, hey, what's really coming from the faith, from the religion, from the Sharia, if you will, which Sharia literally just means law, right? So what's coming from the law, and then what's coming from customs, tradition, not tradition in the sense of sunnah from the Prophet, but tradition in the sense of like your cultural traditions, right?
The aib that your grandpa used to tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. And even I would say from a general, and I'm going to mix two things quickly right now, not to confuse, but to kind of give a little bit more of a framework of generally within the Islamic culture, because culture is not independent from religion. Religion also promotes a certain culture. Culture in Arabic is thaqafa, right? So there's a certain thaqafa, there's a certain culture that we may have. Now, right now in our conversation, we are probably using the word culture more in the sense of like customs, traditions, right? Things that you're bringing on from like a certain ethnic experience or national experience.
Absolutely.
So, but when I'm looking at even for this idea of aib, there are certain things that our faith tell us, listen, this is more appropriate, right? Shar'an, religiously, it may be okay for me to do this one thing, but it may be, for example, more appropriate if I didn't do it. And then you're like, oh, wow, like that's too many restrictions. Well, for example, the way I sit, the way I talk, the way I walk, right? The way I look, the way I present myself, right? The way I speak. All of these things, right? It may be okay, but it may be more appropriate, especially the context. So for example, you're sitting with your boys, and you may be like very relaxed. But then, for example, somebody who is older, right, comes in the room. You're naturally going to adjust yourself. Why? Because it's better, it's more appropriate. That's where a lot of, that comes through. And even religiously, it's observed. Now, culturally, there may be some of those things. If they coincide with the faith and they don't contradict the religion and its frameworks and its laws, then it's fine, right? And in fact, some cultures may reinforce aspects of the religion more than others.
That's where it connects.
That's where it connects. And that's where you find even some cultures that may be more conservative, and especially like maybe some social practices, observance of hijab, and I mean hijab for both men and women, and the way they engage with one another. The faith may be more friendly, right? Or that culture may be more friendly in that sense. While maybe some other cultures, socially they're more, let's say, liberal, or they're more relaxed.
Yeah.
And then that's where some of the challenges come forward, right? Where, wait, the religion doesn't condone this. Actually, you do need to observe some of these, boundaries. I think it's important to set that conceptually. Now, practically, and I was having a conversation recently with a youth group, and they're of a Lebanese background, and they're doing some amazing work. And they were asking, Haj, do you think we should kind of let go of our Lebanese identity? And they're here in North America. Like, do you think we should let go of our Lebanese identity? And I was saying no. And I think they were a little surprised by that.
Why did they want to leave their Lebanese identity?
Not that they wanted to. They love it. They feel like they're balancing. Okay. They're being able to kind of do their practice as Shia Muslims, emphasize the holidays that they have, the commemorations that they have, but at the same time embracing their Lebanese heritage, right? Even though many of them are like, first, second, third generation, Americans. And I said, no, I think you should embrace the Lebanese identity. And then we got into the conversation of why. And I said, it's going to make things more genuine, authentic for you. And then even with the elders in the community who are concerned with protecting this heritage, protecting this culture, if you as a faith group is cognizant of that context and is respecting the heritage roots and the cultural roots that you have, you are going to get more support for you to observe your faith. So for us practically, and this is where it's like, are you a follower or are you a leader, right? This demands from us more of an investment into our own intellectual frameworks, right?
Right.
How do we lead our lives? For me, my religion, my faith is the foundation for every aspect of my life. I've talked about this before, and I've called it, 5 verticals, right? It may assume a different name tomorrow, but the key of it is 5 different areas of your life. And there are more, but let's say 5 main areas: physical, spiritual, intellectual, social, and financial, right? Notice I said spiritual and not religious.
Okay.
Why? The spiritual are the acts of worship, prayers, fasting, dua, supplications, right? The religion is not in the 5. The religion is the foundation. The religion is actually what educates and allows me to be successful in the 5.
Okay.
It provides for that framework of success, right? So now when I'm looking at my cultural expression, my cultural experience, I'm using my religious framework, not ignoring. For me, I don't think it should be a war, a clash between religion and culture. Bil'akis, religion is versatile. Not that it changes, but it encompasses each person's cultural background and experience. Islam came for the whole world.
Yeah.
The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came as a mercy to all of mankind. And the way he led the faith and the way he led his people, also for those who didn't follow his faith, follow him at all, he still had this magnanimous character to embrace all of them. Christians, Jews, disbelievers, people of all different backgrounds. And then you see this with the Imams, you see this with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam being moved by a man who was disregarded by his community just for being a Christian. Imam Ali alayhi salam wouldn't leave the marketplace until that elderly man was taken care of. He said, how dare you use this man up in his old age? Use him up in his youth and now discard him in his old age. Go and take care of him. And this was when the Imam was the Khalifa, right? So this idea of your faith, the religion doesn't clash with culture, but it provides a framework so that whatever diverse culture that you're coming from, right?
You can practice your religion.
You can practice your
and
religion
immerse it in the culture.
And not lose your cultural flavor, right?
Now let me ask you this. You told those kids, the youth, that they should hold on to that Lebanese identity. Now, okay, maybe for me, for you, you're able to do that. But now when you deal with an extra generation, now your kids, how do you make sure they hold on to that as well?
It's a great question. So this is a challenge of generations.
Right.
So we have to be cognizant of the reality that we face. I'm a first generation American, right? I grew up in Lebanon as well. So I'm very much Lebanese American. I'm very much Lebanese and I'm very much American. Linguistically, culturally, experience-wise, I go back and forth. I feel home in both places. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case for my daughter, who's a second generation American, right? I know that has to be the case for her here. Why? Because this is her home. And this is something, by the way, that I believe our religious framework actually provides for us more than any other framework in the world. Because it doesn't allow this person to stay in this kind of limbo. It tells the person, what's your watan? Choose and live. This world is vast. Choose a home. You may have multiple homes. Embrace it. Take it. Move. Now, if I have, or my daughter or my son, this is their home, I can influence them by taking them to Lebanon, by teaching them Arabic at home, by having them go to an Islamic school that is, let's say, friendly to their culture. People of the same culture may be there, right? I can add these things. But second generation, then third generation, then fourth generation.
Where does it end?
Where does it end? And is this like an existential problem? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Why? If you look into history, allegedly, my family, if you look at my family tree, Beit Moughania, allegedly, I'm not sure if this is 100% correct, right? So for those, Beit Moughania that like really know the family tree and know like our ancestors, I may be wrong, but I did read, looking into our family tree, looking into our history, that we actually go back to Banu Asad, the tribe of Asad in Iraq. So that al-asl, our roots, are actually from Iraq. And many, by the way, many people in Lebanon, their roots are not actually from that part of the world. They actually go to either Yemen, other parts of Arabia, or even, into Iraq, general Mesopotamia, Iran, etc. That's not an uncommon thing, right? So then it's like, did those individuals, did our ancestors, was it a problem? Now we're looking, is it an existential issue that, oh my God, we are no longer identifying, let's say, as Iraqi, or we're not no longer identifying as, right? The challenge becomes, if the culture is connected, or if the faith is connected to the culture, meaning if you're no longer Lebanese, or you're no longer Arab, you're no longer Muslim, that's an existential problem.
Okay.
So this is where, and now I'll speak to something that I'm personally very passionate about, which is understanding faith and religion through the accessibility of the English language. And that's probably one of my things, and I will say this very openly, that I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts whatever little I offer, whatever little I put forward. But one of the common themes in all of the books that I've translated and I've written, and all of the lectures that I've given, even in a project that's been going on for years now, but I think this year has picked up the most with my brother, who literally, he's my brother, Yusuf Baydun, in reciting some of these new English latmiyat. My daughter, I'll tell you, and I'm going to share something very personal, right? The first latmi that I had my daughter listen to was an Arabic latmi. And not realizing until my daughter told me this, it's like, Baba, are latmiyat only in Arabic? Like, she's telling, are latmiyat? I told her, no, Baba. She's like, well, why don't I hear any in English? I'm like, would you like to hear it in English, Baba? She's like, yeah, Baba, I want to understand it. So my daughter's 5. At home, we speak English. Do we teach her Arabic? Sure, but it's a secondary language, right? Again, I'm going to be, now some people may come at me and be like, no, Hajj, you need to be teaching your daughter Arabic at home. It should be the primary language. I'm like, listen, my wife and I, we're first generation Americans.
Yeah.
Our primary language is English. Now, hats off to, the families that are emphasizing Arabic at home. But again,
it might not work for everybody.
Absolutely.
Do you think in English?
Naam?
Do you think in English?
I think in English.
Okay.
I also think in Arabic.
Okay.
But as number 2.
Okay.
And this is something that's essential. This is where my challenge for myself and for, many parts of our communities. And by the way, this is not just like a Lebanese or an Arab challenge. Many of our brothers and sisters who are practicing from the Shia Muslim community and the general Muslim community that are immigrants from the subcontinent, from India, from Pakistan, many from the Khoja community. If you go around the world, alhamdulillah, I've been blessed with being able to go to Europe and East Africa and the Middle East, and language is so essential. And more, wherever I go, I see.
That's the commonality.
English. The more there's accessibility through the English language, I guarantee you, people, or could be whatever language that they're speaking. So for example, in Germany, we have a huge Shia community speaking German. In Brazil, we have a huge Shia community speaking Portuguese. And it wasn't until recently that they're starting to do majalis in Portuguese.
Oh, wow.
So for the longest time, majalis are being done in Arabic, let's say in Brazil, because there's a huge Lebanese Shia community in Brazil.
I think it's the
right?
biggest, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But there's a large community. For the longest time, Arabic majalis are done, but I don't know what percentage. There is percentages that were shared with me. I can't verify them. But a very huge number of the community doesn't speak, or maybe speaks but doesn't fully understand the Arabic, right? Here in Dearborn, I mean, we face similar challenges, but alhamdulillah, we've had pioneers that have been working at the English language and providing majalis and education and lectures through the English language for decades now. A lot of communities are not even there yet, or are just starting when we've had it maybe for like at least 3 decades. That's a huge difference. But this accessibility to faith through your native language, whatever that language may be, right? That is essential. Why? Because see this challenge of culture that we're talking about, that you may be losing your culture from generation to generation because you have a new home, essentially. Instead of making it where the new home clashes with every aspect of your identity, let's say you're losing some part, which I don't believe should happen. I believe you should hold on to your cultural roots. Like my kids should know that they're Lebanese, and that their kids and their grandkids should at least know that even if they never see Lebanon again, which I hope, Ya Rab, that they never comes. I believe in going back and forth.
Of course.
Because I believe it enriches the experience. But let's say, worst case scenario, is that they don't have that connection to the Lebanese culture anymore. It can't be also that they don't have connection to their Muslim practice and their Islamic faith. And this is an essential thing. Why? The religion was never meant to be isolated to a certain ethnic community. Look around the world. And I'll challenge it even further. We have so many white, black, Latino, people of non-Arab, non-Eastern ancestries or ethnicities that are fully practicing better than me, Muslims and Shia Muslims.
Why has it been like that for the longest time, that for some reason religion is connected to a place on the map geographically? Why is Islam in the Middle East? And when you lose that Lebanese identity or wherever you're from in that part of the world, you also lose your faith.
So I'm not going to be immature and blame and say, oh, it's because people were just holding on to their cultural identity and they tried to take everything with it and they didn't have the foresight to look into the future. No.
Yeah.
I believe many of our parents, grandparents, and even nowadays, everyone's trying to do the right thing. They're trying to hold on, right? But I think it's sometimes out of that concern of losing that we just kind of like protect things like this, and we don't share it in a way where it can be more accessible, right? Now, I will say, and I think this is important to capture here, the Arabic language is essential beyond the Arabic culture. It's essential because in Islam, the Arabic language was the divinely chosen language of the Holy Quran.
Right.
And that no matter how many different translations you have, the Arabic, right, is the language that the Quran is read, recited, spoken through. That is the word of God, right? That's the divine wisdom. So Arabic should be emphasized, especially through that lens. And mashallah, you have amazing, communities that are non-Arabic speakers, but they learn Arabic and they become even better in Arabic. For one example is Sheikh Razwan Arustu. Mashallah, an amazing teacher and scholar who is from a non-Arabic background and that knows the Arabic language inside out and teaches, both people from non-Arab and Arab backgrounds to be better in Arabic. But I would say, kind of in addition to that, is when you're looking at pointing to the map and saying, this is where Islam is, one, have to realize, Islam did start in this area, which is the cradle of civilization.
Right.
Right? It did start in Arabia. And that's not something to shy away from. But I think the more, and this is something that we'll probably see in generations to come, the more that the Muslim experience is shared through its native speakers, right? So Americans, this is the challenge. Instead of making it where it's a tug of identity, a tug of war between, oh, are we holding on to our Lebanese and Arab heritage, which the Muslim identity and heritage and culture kind of connects with, as opposed to becoming Americanized, that itself is the paradox. Why can't it be where, remember how I was saying earlier, how we had friends in Lebanon saying, into be America, right? You, and actually she said, if I'm, into l'American, you Americans are more committed to the religion than we are. Why can't it be where just like, right, any other community who has gone to any part of the world, Islam started in Arabia and it spread to Iraq, Yemen, Iran, India, Turkey, Africa, Far East, Malaysia, Indonesia, right? Look at these countries in the Far East.
Yeah.
Islam is so native to them. Indonesia is the highest populated Muslim country in the world.
Right.
Right? Hundreds of millions of people, Muslim, right? 2 billion Muslims all over the world. The majority of them are not Arab. Now, when we go to these countries and we go to where they live and their culture, what are they? They are speaking and experiencing Islam through their native language.
Right. They implemented it in their culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, for us, the challenge for many of us is partially a social challenge, partially it's a political challenge. And these are hard conversations to have, is where things are being set up as Islam versus the West.
I agree. I think that...
By the way, there's a lot, I'm just as a caveat, as a disclaimer, there's a lot to unpack in what I just said.
Oh, absolutely.
It shouldn't be taken just at face value.
Absolutely.
There's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely.
You may need like a whole series on this.
Yeah. But the way I see it is, you're right. I think Islam should be integrated in the American culture. But you see people that live here, they're struggling to first let their kids be Muslim in the first place, because everyone's worried that their kids aren't even going to be Muslim and they're not going to be close to faith. Mm-hmm. So who are you doing this work to? And the most of the grown-ups, like your first generation, your family is Lebanese, you know, so they kind of emphasize that in your household. So when you want the switch to happen, do you not want like kind of like a stability within your youth that, okay, you want the youth to be Muslim first and then implement? So what comes first?
That's a good question. What are you asking?
Yeah.
What comes first? This or this? What are this and this?
Islam and the American culture.
What comes first between the two?
Yeah.
Remember what I said before. Religion is the foundation.
Okay.
So wherever you are in the world,
are you going to teach them Islam in Arabic or in English?
Wherever you are in the world, it should be taught with the principles I just mentioned. Arabic is fundamental because it's the language of the Holy Quran.
Okay.
And for their understanding, it needs to be in whatever native language they are speaking. So if we are in Germany and we're speaking German and I'm teaching my kids Arabic and they're learning it, but they don't fully comprehend it. Some kids memorize the Holy Quran from beginning to end. MashaAllah, amazing blessing and amazing feat. However, their understanding, their comprehension is not up there. They need to be, in order for them to connect with it further, it needs to be in the language that they're speaking. So this is where, again, remember I was saying conceptually and then practically, right? Now, practically, you can bring it back to our experience here as Americans, right? Our experience here as Lebanese, living in the United States, as Lebanese Americans, however you identify. For me, that's something that you personally need to choose And that's for each person. I'm not going to come and say to somebody, listen, the way you are identifying yourself, culturally is wrong. That's how you feel. That's how you are, right? Now there's certain realities, right, that you have to observe. I mean, you can't say, oh, I'm not American, and you're holding an American passport, right? And you're going and choosing and going back and forth. You can't say, I'm not Lebanese, and literally you've never seen any other country other than Lebanon, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the sense, like when we're teaching our kids, I'll give you an example, clear example. During Muharram, we have nearly 1,000 youth in the audience at our majlis, which is almost entirely English from beginning to end. The exception of the recitation of the Holy Quran, but the verses are translated in English on the screens. But the Quran is recited in Arabic. Whether you like it or not, the Quran is recited in Arabic. That is the language of the Holy Quran, right? Beautiful. But we emphasize, this is what we're reciting. This is what's, and the English is on the screens. The second, I had a campaign. During my lectures, I wanted to make sure that as many people in the audience had a copy of the Holy Quran. Not just because of what happened in, in Europe, in Sweden. But because, and this is something, by the way, we've been emphasizing for years, during Muharram especially, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam lived and died for the Holy Quran, for Islam, for this prayer. That's what he lived and died for. To protect that, to save that, right? So come to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, holding it close to your heart. You need to get up and pray, go pray. There's a musalla in the back, go pray. In the middle of the majlis, alhamdulillah, every single night, people were reminded of that. They went up and they got and prayed. Why? You're trying to integrate all of these principles together, but you're integrating in a way where they understand. So many people come to me year after year saying, Hajj, this is the first time. Many of them, whether it's the first time or they've been coming for years and saying, I understand more. I am more connected. Not as an emotion, not as a feeling, as an intellectual movement. Why? Is it because I'm doing something so unique and different? Absolutely not.
You just understand what's being said.
I'm just sharing it in the language that they understand.
And even I'll talk about me personally. I lived in Lebanon for 11 years, all of my childhood up to my early 20s. The first time I felt connected to a lecture as when I listened to it in English. I got the idea. I got the message. So I agree with everything you're saying, but you have to start somewhere, and starting is very difficult because when no one has done it before and you're the first to do it, first it's going to come with a lot of mistakes and a lot of challenges, and it's going to be hard to navigate and hard to pass it down as well,
So alhamdulillah, I'm not the first to start with this.
Oh, of course,
right?
yeah.
There's been pioneers in this. My personal mentor, Sayyid Haidar Bahr al-Ulum, he was one of the first, if not the first, to give English majalis consistently in Dearborn back in the 90s. Like our programs that carried from the Bint Jbal Cultural Center when it was back on Miller, before the beautiful center that was dedicated to Al-Marhum Hajj Muhammad Turfa on Prospect. Those majalis they started, and people that weren't going to the mosque, people that didn't feel connected to any center, just listen, come. However you are, as you are, come. And in the beginning, it was very different than what we see today, right? But it was something where people was a starting point, and people became exposed to the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, became exposed to many of the tenets of the faith of the religion. And naturally, because of what was being shared there and understanding it in their language, they became more dedicated, more faithful, more committed, right? And people swear by it. Families swear by it. I have people that will tell me, Jalal, I used to come to Sayyid Haidar's lectures, right? And then I started bringing my kids to you and Sayyid Abadar's lectures. And now, my kids are in college and they're still coming to your lectures, right? And now my nieces and my nephews. Why? Is it because I'm doing something special? No. People will come and say, mashallah and praise and everything. And I wallah, I'm not saying it out of humility. I'm not saying it out of like I'm trying to be humble. One, I believe all of this, many of our scholars have expressed everything we have is from the blessings of Ashura, from the blessings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That's a culture that we have. And we proudly say that. Everything we have is from the blessings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. All these people coming, let's say there's 1,000 people on the day of Ashura, alhamdulillah, on the Maqtal, I think the team had counted over 1,600 people in the hall. Vast majority of them being youth. Overwhelming majority of them only speaking English. That like, in just one program, alhamdulillah, many programs, many halls, many are packed out.
Yeah.
Just in this one program, right? This is all from the blessings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. How are we contributing? By listening closely to the audience and seeing what do they need? How do they communicate? What's going on? For me, when I'm communicating with people, I may have a message to share. Today I have a message to share. There's certain things I had in mind that I maybe didn't communicate the way I had planned. You know why, Jafar?
Why?
It's because I'm listening to you. And I'm trying to answer your questions. I'm trying to adapt to provide them as much value as I can within my principled framework to provide you value for what you need. So I'll give you an example. And some people may disagree with me in this approach. But when I was asking both my team at Mainstay, mashallah, alhamdulillah, we have a team that I'm one of many in. And as well as attendees, right? I was asking them for feedback, right? But I did say, I'm like, listen, when I'm asking for feedback, most people are thinking they're going to give positive reinforcement or constructive criticism. I told them I'm not looking for either. Now, Jafar, when I'm saying I'm not looking for positive reinforcement and I'm not looking for constructive criticism, what do you think I'm looking for?
Did I connect with what you said? Did I understand what you said?
Beautiful.
Did I think that you could have maybe presented this idea in a way that I could have understood it better?
Beautiful. And that's definitely connected to what I'm about to say, and I'm going to connect it a little bit further just so you see it from my perspective. When I'm asking for feedback, I'm asking, I need to better understand the person in the audience. What are they expecting to experience, hear, listen, learn? And am I meeting the expectation?
Absolutely.
So I had people coming and like telling me, Jalal, we're expecting hope. Now I know this person, what they're coming for. It may be, I may have some things, but overwhelmingly I was getting certain feedback was like, okay, now I know what the expectation is. My principles and my values and the lessons, they don't change.
Yeah.
But now I know how to better gear it. Otherwise, there's no difference of me talking to this audience or any other audience or even the wall. If I'm not considering
What
who I'm talking to, what they need, then there's no difference. Now I'm going to connect this back to the language. If my children are speaking, learning, going to their full-time education, K through 12, private school, public school, charter school, they're speaking and learning and living in English or any other language. Again, I'm going to make this global, right? You may be in Tanzania and speaking Swahili, right? Okay. If your religion is not being taught in Swahili, don't you think that you're going to be disconnected with your faith community and your society?
Absolutely.
So when I'm thinking and strategizing for my community, I'm not just thinking about my kids. I'm not thinking about just Emily, Zahra, and Ali. I'm thinking about everybody else's kids and their kids and their kids. Because what we are doing now is going to contribute to the society that we're living in, the community that we're living in 50 years from now, and even 100 years from now, and even beyond that. So the greater infrastructure that we provide in these aspects of self-understanding, where yes, a young Shia, a young Muslim can pick up a book and be like, man, I know the story of Imam Ali's life now. That's huge.
That's
I
important.
know the story of Imam Hussein's life now. That's huge. I now can pound my chest and mourning Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and crying for him because I understand what he went through and I feel it. Do you know how impactful that is?
Yeah.
That's like, for example, the Persians, when Islam first came to them, the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam first came to them, and speaking Farsi. Because right now, Iranians, they have it's very different than the Arabic culture. In the subcontinent, in India and Pakistan, with the many languages that they have, but let's say Urdu in Pakistan, and Hindi, and Gujarati, and all the different languages that are there, they have their expressions in their languages, and they connect through those language, not necessarily through the Arabic. So now think centuries down the line. Are you not going to have fully English-speaking community, just like you have fully Farsi-speaking, Urdu-speaking, Gujarati-speaking, etc., etc.?
Yeah.
That's the way we're looking at it. But that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your culture. That's just making sure that if, let's say, any aspect of the culture or the ethnic identity is to be, put aside or not observed for whatever reason, that the faith isn't sacrificed along with it.
Yeah. Your recent trip to Tanzania, okay? I know there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm really curious to know, briefly, just give me what you did there. And I really want to know what lessons you come back with.
Tanzania has a very special place in my heart. When I left, I put this bracelet on my wrist and I haven't taken it off. I literally haven't taken it off since I left there. And the experience I had, which without the work of the Mainstay Foundation, here in the US, and especially our sister organization in the UK, I wouldn't have had that experience. And even though I serve on the board of directors for our, foundation here in the US, again, a lot of people don't really, we have a lot of teams and they do amazing work. And I was always generally supportive of that work, but it wasn't until I flew down there with our mission, trip group, our team from the US of medical professionals and educators, that I really understood it. It's one thing to see it, and then it's another thing to experience it. And my objective on going on this trip was, we had the medical professionals, they were going to be doing their mobile clinic. The educators, they were going to go into schools and help provide best practices, trainings, connect with the students, and essentially get a pulse of what's going on the ground, in addition to the projects that we've been doing on sustainability through water wells and water systems.
Okay.
So providing clean water is kind of the core project.
But also medical help and education help.
Yeah. So that was basically through this particular trip, the trip that we took in May, we added those two components, and there's a big kind of field study aspect to it, to kind of assessing what's on the ground and then what can be provided moving forward.
Okay.
As a sustainable project.
Okay.
But what Mainstay's been doing for years now with its local partners on the ground, Bilal Mission and others, has been, water. Because, and I saw it firsthand, you build a water well, but when you understand not just what goes into building the water well, but then what comes from it, communities begin to flourish. We flew in to some communities that literally, yes, mashallah, from a landscape aspect, you're seeing mountains and trees and bahr and, sea, and it's amazing. But there's no electricity. There's no infrastructure. There's only dirt roads, no technology. And the reason why is because if you don't have ready access to clean water in every neighborhood and every, like, people are spending 2-3 hours a day each way just walking to the where the clean water is and coming back home.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, and then
3 hours.
yeah, and most of the time it's kids. Most of the time it's kids. The father is working, trying to, provide basic means. The mother is taking care of the youngest children and like cooking and cleaning at home. And then some of these kids, like, and if you go on my stories, because what I did, you'll see these kids, right? You'll see them like literally walking, putting the buckets on their head and walking for miles. What I did, my goal, my objective on this trip was to capture. And
Document.
I was just there to document it. I had my phone and I had my, this small tripod, and I was just like my video was open like all the time as much as I could. And if you go on my Instagram page and you just I think that's like maybe 3. So there's like over 300 clips just on my stories, right? Just capturing it. And we also had my brothers Ali Abdul Rasul and Ali Slim just focused on truly like documenting, because we're working on a documentary for it. But I wanted to share with people immediately, like what during the trip, what was going on. Alhamdulillah, we've had hundreds of people reach out, support, and then also say like, thank you for letting us experience this with you.
Yeah.
Right. So what I walked away from, it's still hard for me to describe, but what I walked away from was a greater sense of community.
What does that mean?
My community is not just Dearborn, Michigan.
Okay.
And growing up, I realized, yes, I have a community in Dearborn, Michigan in the US. I have a community in Lebanon. And then as I grew up into my adulthood, I realized I have a community in the shrine cities because of my spiritual heritage in Najaf, in Karbala. But then I realized, especially through my trip in Africa and even through my more recent travels to the United Kingdom and other places, our community extends in different parts of the world. Our experiences are so similar. A lot of times we're looking at the differences.
Although it's very different in Tanzania. Like if you compare it, just take a picture of where you were and take a picture of here. The pictures look very different. You're saying it's very similar.
On the surface.
Yeah.
But then when you connect human to human, when you connect prayer to prayer, when you connect spirit to spirit, soul to soul, heart to heart, man, we're the same. We're the same.
That's your biggest takeaway.
If kids are thirsty in Kigoma, kids are thirsty in Dearborn. If we don't have what we need in Dar es Salaam, we don't have what we need in Dearborn. Same as London, same as Beirut, same as Najaf, same as Qom, same as anywhere in the world. That's what I take away. I didn't go there as a humanitarian to make myself feel better. Now I contributed to a third world country or a place that, is underprivileged or developing. No, not at all. I learned. They gave me. They contributed to me. I'm developing. They're developed. But there's certain things that we need to be cognizant of. Getting out of our bubbles. We may have certain comforts, certain things that we have, alhamdulillah, we're blessed with ni'mah. Take that and explore and expand and give. Know that your reach can be worldwide. Now, of course, take care of your backyard first, right? Take care of your neighborhood first, right? But realize that you belong to something greater. There are people, man, like when we were in Kigoma and after one really long day visiting all these villages and the medical clinics that we provided and the the education. There's so much going on that one day. It was a Thursday. And then at night we stopped in the city. And we stop and we had Dua Kumail at one of the mosques. And man, the recitation was just so beautiful. And I was like looking at this young man who was just reciting.
In Arabic.
In Arabic. Yeah, in Arabic. And mind you, in Tanzania, they're multilingual.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So many of them, yes, the native language is Swahili, but many of them speak English, Arabic, and other languages as well.
Okay.
Right. Especially in, let's say, Dar es Salaam. So Dar es Salaam, like when we flew into Dar es Salaam, that's the major city. Technically, it's not the capital. It's the capital in the sense of it's the biggest city, but the capital, they have a political capital. That's, I believe Dodoma. But Dar es Salaam is like where it's at. I visited Dar es Salaam for a conference that I spoke at 2 months prior in February. I was invited to speak by the Youth Islamic Service, amazing group. Brother Ali Jawad and some of the other brothers and sisters that organized it. They invited me to come and be one of the speakers for a conference that they had in honor of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So I was in London for some meetings, and I flew to Dar es Salaam. I was there for a day and a half. Just there for a day and a half. I had the conference. It was an amazing experience. I loved it there. MashaAllah, I think it was 1,500 or 2,000 people that were in attendance.
Mm-hmm. Huge
Community. And that community, very educated, multilingual, very diverse. But then even in that particular community, which was majority of the attendance was Khoja, I felt so much more connected to that community, even though we definitely do not share any similarity in ethnic background, right? But there was a commonality in that spirit and that love for Imam Ali, that love for the Prophet and his family, that love for Islam, the love for God, right?
Yeah.
That's something that when you're focusing on that, I don't see color anymore.
Yeah.
I don't see ethnicity anymore. And if I do see it, I'm only seeing it as man, what an amazing background that you come from, right? Can I learn more? Let me not just taste your food as a tourist. Let me taste your culture as someone who's appreciating you and your diversity.
Yeah.
That's where we get to, right? So then when you take that back home, you're able to implement that and then see the core of where should we be living, right? Living in understanding, living in development and maturity, rather than living in the sense of I only like what's mine because it's familiar.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Hajj Jalal.
Habibi.
I appreciate your
My
time.
man, I appreciate you.